The African Union suspends Burkina Faso following a military coup. Pomp and colour as Chinese in Kenya mark the new year, welcoming the Year of the Tiger. And police arrest one suspect in connection to a bus ambush in Kenya that killed at least 10 people. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. With me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Sibanye Stillwater to acquire some assets of rival Amplats in South Africa for R1. And China to identify practical means of delivering outcomes of the BRICS summit as it takes over chairmanship. Of course, all that coming up within the program for now.
Thanks, Uche. In our top story, the African Union has suspended Burkina Faso from all activities. The decision comes as envoys from the Economic Community of West African States and the United Nations head to Burkina Faso for talks with junta leaders. The AU says its decision will remain effective until the restoration of constitutional order in Burkina Faso. ECOWAS has also suspended Burkina Faso and warned of possible sanctions depending on the outcome of Monday's meeting with coup leaders. The latest military takeover is the fourth in the region in just 18 months. Mali and Guinea are also under military rule and are facing sanctions from the West African bloc. Well, that delegation of ECOWAS ministers was expected in Burkina Faso precisely 1 week after a military coup that ousted President Roch Marc Christian Kabore. The meeting follows a virtual summit last Friday focusing on the security situation in the country. CGTN's Desiree Canon reports.
Times for talks have come. In addition to the military, the joint ECOWAS and UN delegation will have meetings with the various Burkinabe actors. For some observers, Burkina Faso still has a chance to escape ECOWAS sanctions.
If the military leaders, if they want to, bring deep change in Burkina Faso, they would like to need time, and ECOWAS would not accept this. So for sure, there would be sanctions to come from ECOWAS. But I don't think they are going to use the same sanction that they are imposed on Mali, because the sanctions on Mali pushed Mali from Europe, to Russia. And this lesson will, for me, would, prevent, ECOWAS from, using the same sanction, on Burkina Faso.
We are in an unconstitutional situation because the constitution is suspended in Burkina Faso. And for me, it was completely normal for the country to be suspended by the ECOWAS authorities. I do not consider this sanction a real sanction. A real sanction, if there really will be a sanction, is the one that will be taken after examinations and reports by the various commissions after discussions with the military.
Here in Burkina Faso, people continue to insist that the new military regime needs a lot of time to lay the foundation for democracy and get the country out of the insecurity it faces. Desiree Canon, CGTN, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
Well, here in Kenya, local media reports indicate that security forces have detained one suspect allegedly involved in an attack in the nation's Mandera County. At least 10 people died after a minibus taxi known as a matatu, ferrying an unknown number of passengers, drove over an improvised explosive device. Authorities say about 8 other people were injured in the incident. Police suspect Al-Shabaab militants operating in the area may be responsible for the assault. The hit comes after various foreign governments, including France and the US, issued warnings of possible terror attacks.
This morning, we had a vehicle flying Arabia to Mandera town, ferrying passengers. On reaching at a place called Minta, the vehicle runs over an ID which was placed inside a culvert. Unfortunately, when it's run over the ID which was placed under the culvert, it exploded. It was actually a double one, exploded, and unfortunately we have lost life. So I think when the vehicle was so overloaded, there was a big number than it is required.
We responded very fast with the ambulances, and we mobilized the team, the medical doctors, the nurses, and everybody. We managed to stabilize them. In total, there are about 13 casualties. We are trying to stabilize the rest of the patients. 4 of them which are critically injured. 2 is already in data, and we hope to stabilize all of them.
Malawi has reported at least 32 deaths, 147 injuries and 20 missing people after last week's tropical cyclone Ana. The country's Department of Disaster Management has also confirmed that close to 1 million people have been affected by the disaster. Officials say Chikwawa and Nsanje districts in southern Malawi are the hardest hit. The disaster, which was characterized by strong winds, rains and floods, has disrupted power supply in the southern African country. President Lazarus Chakwera on Wednesday declared a state of disaster in 15 districts. Chakwera also pleaded with the international community to assist with humanitarian aid. Cyclone Ana has also hit other southern African countries, including Mozambique, Madagascar and Zimbabwe.
4 children died, 4, plus the man from the army too. So 5 in total that we know. But for sure more have died, and this time no one told us the water was coming. Each neighbor was just running for themselves.
The water was coming very fast. We couldn't save our belongings because the water suddenly came.
Well, let's bring you up to date now on the row between Russia and Ukraine. Various nations have divergent views on how to tackle the situation. While the UK and the US have been sending military support and adding troops in Ukraine, Germany has refused to send weapons there and even urging other European countries not to do so. Let's hear now from our correspondent Guy Henderson from Kiev for more.
Well, within the Western camp, there are divergent and diverging views on exactly what the approach should be to de-escalate this crisis. On the one hand, you have countries like the United Kingdom, whose Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be heading to Ukraine later this week, who argue in favour of taking a harder approach that they say is more likely to persuade someone like Russian President Vladimir Putin to back down, essentially. That is a view perhaps more aligned with that of the United States. And that is why you have seen both the US and the UK send anti-tank missile systems, for example, to Ukraine. That is why you've seen the UK government introduce a plan to widen the scope of potential sanctions against Russia should things escalate further. I think what we'll hear from that side of the argument this week is tough language from Prime Minister Boris Johnson and warm thanks from senior officials in Kiev, particularly when it comes to that kind of military aid and military support. On the other hand, you then have a delegation of the European Parliament, which is currently in the eastern city, port city of Mariupol, and that is representative of what is still the prevailing continental European approach to diplomacy at the moment, mainly led by France and Germany, which says essentially we should continue to tread carefully here. We shouldn't risk severing ties and severing chances of dialogue. And that, I'm sure, will continue to be a discussion point through the week as well, because aspects of that have irked some senior officials in Kiev, particularly Germany singled out for example, not only refusing to send lethal aid, but actually blocking some of its European partners from doing so as well. Interesting to watch the sort of balance that politicians have to play in Kiev, because on the one hand, they're very thankful for example, the lethal military aid that's coming from countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, but at the same time, they're actually quite critical of the language that diplomats and politicians from those same countries are using in places like the UN Security Council at the moment when they talk of publicly of the threat of imminent invasion and the build-up of Russian troops on the border. And you've heard from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his allies in recent days words like "keep calm." They are keen for officials in those countries specifically to sort of tone down their language. And I think one of the main reasons for that, or certainly a contributing factor, is the impact that kind of language they believe is having on the Ukrainian economy. Big falls in the stock market, rising inflation's ticked above 10% or around the 10% mark in the last month or so. And their worry, of course, is that if Vladimir Putin's aim is to destabilize Ukraine, well, at the moment, their view is that that's already happening, that is at least taking a step towards Vladimir Putin achieving some of his goals without a gun even being fired.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the programme. Pomp and colour as Chinese in Kenya ring in the new year, welcoming the Year of the Tiger.
Dancing together. Sharing laughter.
Compartimos ilusiones.
Mientras atestiguamos el inicio de 2022.
C'est super.
C'est chouette, hein?
Oui.
Grandissons ensemble.
نتطلع معا نحو المستقبل.
نجتمع معا في وئام.
Вместе любим. Костя.
Привет.
Благополучие в новом году. Have a prosperous year of the tiger. We wish you peace and prosperity.
Mucha salud y prosperidad en el año nuevo.
Que tous nos meilleurs vœux
De bonheur, de santé et succès
vous accompagnent en 2022.
عيد ربيع سعيد وكل عام وأنتم بخير.
С Новым годом, с новым счастьем.
新春快乐2022 CGTN 和你一起向未来。
China is celebrating the Lunar New Year as hundreds of millions of people welcome the Year of the Tiger. Also known as Spring Festival, the holiday is an important time for family reunions. Millions have been traveling back to their hometowns. Official data shows about 29 million passenger trips were registered nationwide on Sunday, mostly on highways. Coronavirus prevention and control measures remain a top priority, but authorities say local governments must refrain from recklessly imposing additional rules targeting people from specific regions. Well, Chinese Lunar New Year celebrations have kicked off across the world, highlighting the importance of cultural exchanges between China and the rest of the world. The celebrations to mark China's Lunar New Year are meant to promote mutual understanding and communication between different cultures. CGTN's Daniel Arabmoy has more.
10, 9, 8, 6.
Revelers flock to ring in the Chinese Lunar New Year and welcome the fast approaching Beijing Winter Olympics at a celebratory event hosted by the China Media Group in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Held at the Two Rivers Mall, a major shopping center in the East African metropolis, The celebration centered on a real-time live screening of the China media group's Spring
Africa, and this celebration of New Year is an indication of the long history and cultural heritage that Africa and China has shared.
Basically what it means is that there's a lot of influence now, and it is getting culturally acceptable in the whole world. I mean, from America to Asia to Europe to Africa. This is Kenya right now, and you can see that there's a lot of enthusiasm. And so, yes, I think the Chinese culture is really, becoming pervasive around the world.
Chinese New Year has become one of the most widely celebrated festivals, not just in China, but across the world. Revelers had the opportunity to sample Chinese delicacies while enjoying performances, participating in lucky draws, and getting a taste of the unique traditions associated with this ancient holiday.
It's my first time, so it's an interesting tradition to watch. It's very colorful, and I'm here for all of it.
I'm glad I'm enjoying their culture. I'm yet to enjoy their food, though. I hope I will. Yes.
At the stroke of midnight in China, which marked the start of the lunar year of the tiger, Africa's largest Ferris wheel, the Eye of Kenya, was illuminated with the color red, symbolic of luck and good fortune in Chinese culture. The celebration was also an opportunity for Kenyans to look ahead towards the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics, due to kick off in the Chinese capital later this week. The Swahili language version of the Winter Olympics theme song featured on Monday's soundtrack. The Games will see athletes from 5 African countries, including Kenya, Eritrea, Madagascar, Morocco, and Nigeria, compete. This will make Beijing the first city in history to host both a summer and winter Olympics. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Zambia's Minister of Youth, Sports and Art, Elvis Ngandu, has wished the Chinese people a happy Spring Festival and success at the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. Speaking to CGTN, Ngandu said the event is not only monumental for the Chinese people, but also for the international community.
I want to say that on behalf of the Zambian government and the people of Zambia, I want also to wish, as I said earlier, the Chinese people a happy Spring Festival and a complete success for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Having said that, I want also to say that the Winter Olympics in China is a major event, not only for the people of China, but also for the global community, as the Games have received great attention and wide support from the international community.
Well, as China celebrates the Lunar New Year and the Spring Festival, a section of Chinese nationals living in Nairobi, Kenya, are making new traditions among friends. CGTN's Wokista Nyabwa spent an afternoon with young Chinese professionals sharing their cultural traditions with friends from different countries.
On a sunny afternoon in Nairobi, friends gather in the backyard to make dumplings. The trickiest part lies in the folds. The edges of the pastry are firmly pressed together over meaty or vegetable fillings and then cooked. Wei Yi is a Chinese national who has been working in Nairobi for almost 2 years. Today, she is hosting her friends and colleagues to a dumpling-making party in keeping with traditions to celebrate the Chinese New Year.
Most of them are actually not Chinese. So for us, this is actually a great opportunity to introduce the Chinese culture, how we celebrate Chinese New Year, why the New Year is important.
Under normal circumstances, Wei Yi would travel back home to mark the occasion with family members, but the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has made it difficult to travel.
Well, for me, I haven't been able to go back to China for almost 9 months now. Although it's different from being in China, but we still wanted to celebrate as much as we can.
So she's creating a new tradition away from home. Each member of the party has brought something to share. In return, they'll learn something new.
I think like it's pretty similar to Japanese culture, like people gather together and eat a big meal, but like this celebration is pretty new for me.
At the heart of it all is a shared sense of belonging, of community.
It's been really lovely. I really like the aspect that we have of communal making food together.
I think it's more about just embracing the diversity and celebrating together. And doesn't matter it's Chinese dumplings or it's Japanese gyoza. And I think the essence of celebration it's the same. It's shared by all countries.
After an eventful period living in the shadow of a pandemic, this little party looks forward to the Year of the Tiger with hope.
To me, like tiger is about like courage and strength. So I hope everybody who is celebrating the Lunar New Year for Tiger will find a lot of courage and strength in the upcoming year.
As they usher in the Chinese New Year, these young professionals have found ways to make the occasion special even far from home. They are sharing food and building new communities among new friends in new places. Bulkisanyabwa, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
And now to North Africa, where our correspondent Yasser Hakim met with a Chinese restaurant owner in Egypt and filed this report.
Yan Hui is preparing food for clients in her small restaurant in the affluent Cairo suburb of Maadi. Yan Hui, nicknamed Mariam here, has been in Egypt for 8 years. She's married to her Chinese partner Yasin and has 2 boys, Ayman and Anas.
I am happy in Egypt and Egyptians are treating us very well. I have adapted to life easily here because I and my family are Muslims. So there were no differences between our traditions and habits when we lived in China and now when we're here in Egypt. Also, I have been in Egypt for 8 years and I'm now used to the life here.
Her restaurant is called Silk Road, which serves Chinese food, a popular cuisine for Egyptians.
Egyptians like Chinese food. When we opened the restaurant, the most popular dish for Egyptians was the beef noodles and fried noodles. But now, many youth like the hot pot and come out to try the hot pot experience.
The restaurant is also popular amongst many Chinese expats.
The dishes is very delicious. I like this restaurant very much because my hometown is in the northwest of China. So those dishes are very suitable for me. I think the biggest difference is from the kind of dishes, just like for the local people, they like the meat. But for Chinese people, we like vegetable very much.
Yan Hui says she's not been able to celebrate Chinese New Year back home recently.
Travel is very, very difficult because of the coronavirus pandemic. There's a 14-day isolation in China and many days of isolation here too. So it's very hard and tiring to travel. Also, ticket prices have become very expensive, so it's not easy to travel.
And to make up for missing her country, Mariam has planned to make her restaurant a haven for Chinese expats to gather and celebrate the Chinese New Year.
We celebrate in Egypt by gathering in the restaurant, eating dumplings, watching Chinese TV, and enjoying time together.
She's hopeful that next time she will be celebrating New Year with her relatives and friends in China. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Ugandans living in China joined their Chinese friends to welcome the Lunar New Year in style. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga spoke to some of those Ugandans living in China via Zoom about the plans for this festival season.
Linda Nambasa is already in a celebratory mood. It's that time of the year when Chinese prepare to welcome the New Year, also known as the Spring Festival. It's also Year of the Tiger, according to the Chinese calendar.
Also excited because I got a chance to dance with people on streets and it was really, really amazing. And yeah, how am I going to celebrate it? I'll just wake up, cook some food.
But she's not the only Ugandan joining the celebrations. Wilson Abaho is planning to dine with Chinese friends, and he's happy to share the experience with his family members back home.
We have a Chinese family of friends who have already invited us. We shall be joining them for the celebrations, specifically to enjoy their cakes. They are called dumplings. So that's how we plan to spend the day.
Abaho could be thousands of miles away from home, but that has not stopped him from sharing his joy with his relatives back home. And as he moves out to create new friends, it is hoped that he will come back home with new ideas to rebuild his country. Ugandans living in China believe the Spring Festival is the right time to share different cultural experiences.
So instead of the 3 people I usually meet, I'm expecting a number as big as 8 people. Of course, Chinese do not live those big families, but at least 8 people. And the bigger the number, of course, the better the opportunities of meeting and making new friends.
They also get the time to give and receive home vows like this. You get a note or any amount of money and you put in the envelope like this. You give it and you also get a chance to receive one like this.
But for Linda and others, the party has just begun. The festival is expected to last for 16 days, starting from the Chinese New Year's Eve. Hilara Isiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, time for your business news now. Here's Uche with the latest.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Sibanye Stillwater to acquire some assets of rival Amplats in South Africa for R1. And China to identify practical means of delivering outcomes of BRICS summits as it takes over chairmanship.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa, where Anglo-American Platinum will sell a 50% interest in its Kroondal and its Marikana operations in South Africa to rival Sibanye Stillwater. Now, Sibanye Stillwater will acquire the projects for a cash consideration of R1. That's about 6 US cents, and all associated liabilities of the projects. These include costs related to rehabilitation, estimated at 415 million rand, or just about $26.7 million. Now, Sibanye will also deliver 1.35 million ounces of platinum concentrate from Kroondal to Amplat's Rustenburg smelting operations, and that's all part of the transaction. Now, Amplat says its Kroondal and Marikana operations had limited strategic value. Sibanye, however, says the transaction will extend Kroondal's life of mine to 2029 and also save jobs. Both mines have a combined workforce of over 30,000 people. Meanwhile, China hopes to identify practical means of delivering the outcomes of previous BRICS summits and also promote effective cooperation between BRICS member countries. This is according to Li Zhijiang, who's minister in the Chinese Embassy of South Africa. He was speaking during a South Africa BRICS think tank session in Johannesburg. China, of course, has this year officially assumed the rotating chairmanship of BRICS. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamelo with more.
The BRICS bloc brings together 5 of the largest developing countries of the world, representing 41% of the global population, 24% of the global GDP, and 16% of the global trade. BRICS is an acronym for the economic bloc of countries that consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. These countries meet on a yearly basis to deliberate on critical issues and rotate the BRICS chairmanship. China has this year taken over the chairmanship from India. The BRICS think tank session held in Johannesburg presented an opportunity to engage in a discussion of China's priorities for its 2020 BRICS presidency and its goals.
We have officially kick-started the BRICS Year of China. The first BRICS Sherpa meeting this year, held last week, was a great success. China put forward specific cooperation ideas and received positive response from all parties. We believe that with the support of all member countries, the BRICS Year of China will achieve more results based on what we have gained last year and the year before, and open up a brighter future for our common development.
Minister Li Zhigang says China is looking forward to working with BRICS partners to deepen cooperation in all areas and build a closer and more results-oriented partnership to meet common challenges and create a better future. According to many speakers at this gathering, the African continent is looking forward to China's assumption of the BRICS chairmanship, and there are some expectations for China to implement and try to resolve during this period.
We expect as Africa that China, a strategic partner of Africa, would, as a member of United Nations Security Council, as a chair of BRICS, will indeed advance Africa's wish, Africa's demand for transparency, opening up of the United Nations, a struggle that has been going on for decades, where the African continent demands the reforms of the United Nations Security Council.
The African continent usually has 2 to 3 non-permanent seats on the Security Council of the United Nations. The UN has 193 member states. Yudisa Njamala for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Treasury has recorded a large surplus for December, prompting analysts to now speculate that its revenues for this period may outperform expectations. Now, with less than a month to go to budget day, the latest monthly figures from the Treasury suggest that the government revenues could come in at over $12 billion higher than the estimates of a year ago. Now, the budget deficit is expected to be significantly lower than Enoch Godongwana, who is the finance minister, projected in his November medium-term budget policy statement, thanks mainly to strong corporate income tax collections. And in Uganda, state-owned oil company is planning to sign a final investment decision on February 1st for a large oil field and pipeline project as it looks to become a crude exporter. Now, Total Energies and China National Offshore Oil Corporation, alongside Uganda National Oil Company, are developing projects expected to reach an output of 230,000 barrels a day. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said last year that an agreement was reached with the companies to start production by 2025. Now, a range of agreements related to the projects were already completed last year. And staying with that, January World Economic Outlook reports the IMF also upgraded Egypt's GDP growth by 0.4% in 2022 to 5.6%. Now, the lender noted that Egypt's managed to handle the setback caused by the pandemic well compared to oil importing countries. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with more.
Despite downgrading the global and regional economic growth this year, the International Monetary Fund has upgraded Egypt's growth as the lender said stronger data showed the country's economic performance had grown at a faster rate than expected in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. The North African country has benefited from robust consumption demand, growing remittances, and contained inflation rates, despite the onset of the pandemic.
The sector that led was investments in information technology, especially after the coronavirus pandemic led to high rates of digital transformation. Secondly, our exports. For the first time in Egypt's history, we exceeded exports of $31 billion. Also, investments in agriculture pushed up agricultural exports. SMEs also did well. The state is convinced that a strong economy is based on well-established small and medium enterprises and therefore is encouraging SMEs to flourish.
Aggressive economic reforms launched in 2016 have created a diversified and resilient economy that helped to weather the COVID-induced fallout. The North African nation was one of a handful of countries worldwide to post positive growth rates in 2020.
The critical test is to maintain an upward trend amidst continued challenges like the COVID-19 and its variants, as well as the supply chain disruptions and commodity shortages.
There is a gradual recovery in important sectors, such as oil and gas, as well as tourism. But success depends on how the government is facing the obstacles ahead.
The main challenge is the coronavirus. It remains a global crisis that we don't know when it will end. We're trying to deal with it. At first, there were shocks from this crisis. Now we're adjusting accordingly, and the government is supporting every sector and segment of the society with various initiatives to survive this crisis.
The World Bank and the IMF reports are confident that if Egypt maintains performances of the last year, it will confidently post growth rates that could hit 7% from the current 3.5% by 2025. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's stay in Egypt. As China ushers in its Lunar New Year, the season marks the start of yet another year of strengthening deep ties that the country shares with many African nations. While Egypt is one such country, it has witnessed stronger relations and a cooperation with China in many sectors over the decades. Well, here's Yasser Hakim again with that.
Egypt was the first Arab and African country to recognize China. Both nations have had a long and close political and diplomatic relationship that has been further strengthened by Chinese President Xi Jinping and his counterpart, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
But ties go well beyond politics. There's a long history in cultural and economic relations. For instance, Egypt is the largest importer of Chinese products in the Middle East and North Africa. And bilateral trade has more than tripled in the last 6 years.
And this closeness has been evident with the rise in bilateral trade even during the global supply chain disruptions after the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic.
The official number of imports from China are around 12 billion, but it's actually much more. Our exports to China are slowly increasing, mainly in raw materials and agricultural products like oranges, dates and vegetables. Chinese expertise is unmatched. You can't establish any project now without seeking Chinese assistance, either logistical, technical or financial. China provides value for money, so China has a priority here because of the huge success it achieved.
China has played a big role supporting Egypt during the pandemic. It was the first to send vaccines to the North African country. It established factories to produce anti-COVID medical equipment in partnership with the private sector. But more importantly, it has partnered with the Egyptian government to manufacture the Sinovac vaccine in Egyptian plants, allowing a steady supply of the vaccine to the local and neighboring markets. But Chinese investments in 2021 vastly exceeded those in the medical sector.
China's long experience benefited Egypt in national projects like establishing fisheries, building the textile city, and will expand to other sectors.
Going into the new year, Chinese companies continue to hit milestones in the North African nation. They're building the country's first monorail, the first electric train, the exclusive high-tech business city at the new administrative capital, and the iconic tower, which is the tallest of its kind in Africa. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, Ghana holds its benchmark interest rate while the IMF warns the country is at high risk of debt distress. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thanks, Muche. Well, still plenty ahead on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up after the break. South Africa's tourism industry banks on the easing of COVID restrictions to revive profits.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
South Africa has shaken off the worst of COVID-19 and rebooted its festival calendar. Events came to a virtual halt during the almost 2-year lockdown, which impacted heavily on tourism and small businesses. With the country now on its lowest level of restrictions, the event sector is slowly being revived. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more.
Against the backdrop of popular tourist spots Lebo's Backpackers, Soweto's famous festival brought new life to South Africa's vibrant festival scene.
We're a business that creates a platform for small businesses. So, I mean, without any gathering, we can't work. So the impact was very, very horrible, not only to us, but all the small businesses that we are connected to.
Losses almost crushed the industry. A devastating 700,000 jobs have been shed since March 2020. Small businesses across the tourism, arts and crafts, hospitality and catering sectors could also not escape the sting of a lengthy lockdown.
Personally, I was living like on hand to mouth because I had to target my products, market them through like on my WhatsApp or maybe like on social media. I had to adjust everything. Budget-wise, I have to adjust.
Business is slowly picking up. Entrepreneurs are optimistic the festival will spark a strong turnaround.
The impacts of the lockdown has devastated the country as well as the economy of township. Yeah, I'm very, very happy that at least we can showcase our works. People from different locations, suburbs, can show their products and market themselves.
My customer base, it's tourists most of the time. My hopes for 2022 is for business to come back as normal, for everyone to go back to their regular lives. And then in that form, everyone will be able to survive and will be able to get more channels to even get out of the country and explore our work somewhere out of South Africa.
Johannesburg and other cities are working hard to revive the industry after a 2-year lull.
The whole industry has really been affected by the pandemic, but slowly we can see now that most countries are opening up. They are allowing for South Africans to start traveling. But over and above, once the vaccination has reached its peak, obviously the industry will now start picking up.
Countries are gradually opening as the Omicron wave subsides, but until the international tourists return, local businesses are depending on South Africans to keep the kitty ticking over. Julie Shara, CGTN, South Africa.
Staying in South Africa, a school for the blind and visually impaired, known as the Athlone School for the Blind, has been teaching students how to read using Braille for close to 90 years. The school's success has led to some students returning to teach Braille. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
Like many schools on the Cape Flats, the Athlone School for the Blind lacks some resources. However, just like many institutions, it has a common goal: to provide its blind and visually impaired students with the best education possible. The school does this through the medium of Braille and by using the most basic of equipment.
The bulk of our learners at school, for example, won't be able to purchase, all the latest assistive devices that are being offered out there. and that other countries such as America and Britain have, we now recently have been introduced to devices such as, the Apex and Safari, but these devices are very expensive.
Below 0.5% of the school's more than 200 learners have access to modern devices that assist blind and visually impaired people. However, the school is trying to change that by using a computer lab, but space is limited. That's one of the many challenges that learners and educators at the institution continue to face.
We still have to wait for stuff to be, for example, transcribed. That's one of the challenges we as Braille teachers sometimes have, is that things are not in a format that which are accessible to us.
Bonita Blankenberg is one of the school's former students who took up a career in education. She now teaches one of the Braille classes. For her, her journey has come full circle.
It's always something I wanted to do, to kind of give back, because when I was at school here, we had some of the best educators in the country, and they taught us a lot, and one of those things are Braille. Very important part of the life of a blind person, I think, personally. And for me to be back here teaching it to young, aspiring kids and learners, it's actually more of a privilege than anything else.
Many of the learners come from rural areas and cannot access customized facilities for their use when they leave. But that will slowly begin to change as more of them take up the challenge of instilling change in their own communities. South Africa's hard lockdown brought on by the pandemic has hit the school hard. Students here were unable to learn Braille for up to 6 months, which has had an adverse effect on their education. This school's determination, though, to overcome adversity is what will assist many of them to one day become productive members of society. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Your sports news up next on Africa Live. Coming up, Christian Eriksen joins Brentford after months out due to cardiac arrest.
How would you create your legend?